it's great to have you today on the Building a Better World podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation. Today we have my good friend Daniel Thompson, who's founder and CEO at Noma Collective. And I'm really excited to get into what he's building and what he's been building and the amazing community he's put together. And really excited for this conversation. Thanks for joining me, Daniel.
Yeah, man, excited to be here. Happy I could take a moment away from the office and sit outside. So yeah, man, let's do it.
Nice. Where are you at? Where are you calling me from?
So this is our house in Mérida in Yucatan, Mexico. It's the peak heat season. So it's like over 103, I think, right now. So
wow.
Yeah, if you see a sweat drop, then you'll know why. But no, it's really lovely out here. It's kind of my space where we do a lot of community stuff around a lot of people, and here's like where I come back to like hibernate and recharge, because I think everyone knows that you need those moments.
Yeah, for sure. So it's kind of your retreat every year. How much do you spend there? Just curious.
So my son was born here actually, and we were here pretty much full time for the first year or two, and then as I started going to more conferences and kind of getting out there and kind of doing more of the front facing stuff as a CEO, that meant more travel. So it's kind of like slowly gone the other way. So I think this year we're about 6 months in, 6 months out.
Cool.
But yeah, life is very different. It's like, I play football regularly. We go to the park. It's very much like family orientated. And then I'll be in like Prospera, or I'll go on one of our trips, or I'll go to a conference, and then it's like, full action mode.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I would love to hear about your background. Tell me kind of, what you've done and, how you got to starting Noma Collective, and would love to hear about that too.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I've always been kind of creating, I guess I use the word like safe spaces for people to come together, and people come together over like different reasons or thoughts or movements. So for most of my late teens, early 20s, I worked in music. My family's actually all like with a music background. And so I started off doing just club nights, and then we started doing like one-day festivals, and went to like week-long festivals. And yeah, I mean, it kind of, after about 10 years in the music game and in the festival game, me and my partner, who's also a founder in Noma, a guy called Jack, we kept kind of looking at like, what's the next thing? There's a kind of a joke in the music industry. You don't want to be the old guy at the party. Like you do age out of that, right? A little bit. And so, yeah, my buddy actually, he went to this like really experiential focused hotel in Portugal, I think it was, where like the owner sat round. He cooked dinner every day for people, and the only thing he asked was that everyone came and sat around the table and like talked and had this moment. And like my buddy came back just so gassed, like this is what's going to be the future of like hospitality. It's these like experiences where people actually get to know each other, like, and so that's when the kind of, I guess, the origin birth of Noma happened, was him coming back from that hotel. And then we started playing around with the idea of this kind of experiential hotel. This was around about 2015 to 2017. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, Selena was kind of starting. And if people don't know Selena, it's like that, although they kind of ended up failing, their idea was really good. Their marketing was really good. I think they kind of grew too big, a little bit. But yeah, so I guess at that point, we saw this gap in the market, which was like, there's like a hotel, like a Marriott, which is super comfortable but has no vibe. And then there's a hostel, and that has all the vibe and no comfort. And like, why can't we find a middle ground? And so that was the original thesis. Went through a bunch of iterations. I moved out to Belize to kind of like see if I could get this project together. I had an investor. We had a piece of land. We finally get out there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it fell apart because of COVID, man. Like I moved out like 2 months before COVID. Everything shut down, and that's when I basically had a lot of time on my hands. I couldn't do festivals because you couldn't like commune, and that's when his light bulb went off in my head. Like, I've been working remote on and off since 2012, and it was just like, oh, like maybe this is the niche market. This is the actual kind of real piece of it, like this world of remote workers that like suddenly doesn't have any infrastructure but has all the freedom to travel the world, right? And so that's like where where I guess Noma officially started. We took over this hotel when the restrictions were rolling back, kind of 2021. We decided to roll the dice, and we took over this hotel, and we created this kind of like co-live, this bubble. This is when people were still testing in and out. So it was like very much just like, can we escape? Can we create a place where people can escape to and have everything in one place? And that's what we did. So it was kind of like I guess the silver lining for quite a crazy COVID moment, at least to me.
Amazing. Wow. And what was I guess the thing that you noticed in terms of the people that came, the connections that happened? What was the very kind of organic thing that you realized, besides just it selling out, like this was something that people really came away with something with?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So like I always say I thought I was solving an infrastructure problem, but I'm
Yeah.
actually solving a loneliness problem. Like
Mhm.
that, I think the big takeaway from it, because it was like it was extreme during lockdowns, but I
Mhm.
think like the hangover from the lockdowns, people are still experiencing that a lot today.
Mhm.
So I saw that like remote work, in my opinion, is like the internet, it's like electricity, it's this massive shift because of the freedom element. Like that's what I always say to everyone. It's like the ability to be able to choose where you are physically, to take away things like commuting. It's like it could be, oh yeah, I could go travel, but it could be like my grandma needs help and I need to be around, and so I need to work from her house. Like those type
Mhm.
of options were just impossible 20 years ago. So there's this massive shift in freedom, but there really isn't like the infrastructure for you to take advantage of it. And so what I find happens is there's like two types of people. There's people that are trailblazers that just maybe they had a early travel experience, or they're just crazy enough to go and do it without any sort of template. But then the majority of people don't make that leap because of fear, generally, of the unknown. And it's logical. It's like if you were to listen to the news, you'd think the moment you get off a plane in Brazil, you're going to get shot. That's unfortunate the way, but like, there's the old saying within the news world, it's like, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's the problem, is people tend to think like that, right? So yeah, that was like a big revelation, is that people want a place to take advantage of their location independence with a bunch of other people, because we're pack animals. We want to do this with people.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, in terms of the structure, do you have to be with a family, or can you come as a single, or how does it work? A couple?
Yeah, so it started as mainly for like singles and
Mhm.
couples, because that's the moment I was in that moment. And so
Yeah.
I tend to build for like what I need, right? I guess is the way I would look at it. And so it was initially focused on that. Although we did have families come to that first year, and we have had
Mhm.
families come, but I think there's a big difference in the infrastructure needed for families versus kind of single solo travelers or partners. And so I would say about 80 to 85% of our trips are mainly that market, the nomad market, the remote market, and that's either, yeah, single travelers or couples. But then I had a kid 3 years ago. And
Yeah.
so, like, again, I was thrown into this, like, oh, like, what's the infrastructure that's needed? Because there's definitely isn't the stuff for me, right? Like, that's for sure. Like, I felt like in the same position that I felt when I was first started nomading in 2015 or 2013. It was like, oh, like there's no template, there's no pathway, and there's definitely no infrastructure for us, or limited, right? You really have to build it yourself. Shout out to Boundless Life for being the pioneers in that space, for like really creating this network of schools and places where you could do that. But now, since 3 years, we've been doing what we call Noma Family, and Noma Family is essentially like the remote work travel kind of core product with like a summer camp education overlay, if you will. So we essentially do it during the summer holidays. We find a dope location with like a walkable setup, like almost like a village, if you will. But there's a bunch of villas and a bunch of amenities and like, place for you to work and a school. And we set up shop there for like a month.
That's awesome. So you have basically now an offering for singles, couples, and families with kids.
Yeah, we have it all. And I'm like, basically kind of looking at this like I'm looking at this from the perspective of like a journey that you go through. I think that's how I see it. Like I see the remote life as different stages, and it all starts with you getting the job, and you're generally earlier in your journey at that point. And not to say that there aren't a bunch of people that start with kids and start late, and it's not like a linear thought process there, but it's kind of like you start with a month trip, you love it, you get your training wheels off, you then starting to see, oh, the world is my oyster. We've all been in that moment where it's just like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can just go anywhere type of thing, right? That's this kind of like full expansion moment, which I guess you could call digital nomadism. But then like what I saw, at least in the market, was that like, that's just where the world assumes everyone stays. Like, you know, oh, are you nomad for a bit and then you go backwards? And I just really didn't like that as a concept, that you just have to go backwards, or that like it's this kind of lonely transient person kind of stuck in this world. Like that felt really weird to me. And so I started going, well, how does it look for me in my life? It looked like I did a bunch of traveling, and then I picked 2 or 3 places that I really liked, and I kind of kept like going to those places. So my traveling slowed down, and then I met this guy in Argentina, and he had come up with this word or term called multilocal, which I love. And I think that's like the next stage post digital nomadism, is this multi-local lifestyle where you have 2 or 3 places that you spend longer periods of time in, that you put down roots. And then that changes everything, because you may be having a kid at that point, you may be starting businesses. So then the infrastructure needs become very different. You're not looking at co-working and Airbnbs, you're looking at like visas and taxes and like, a bunch of different issues. And so that's where I see this going. And that's where I started to get into the network state world and special economic zones, because when you start to travel, you start to realize all these systems are antiquated and outdated for what we need. Like going to open a bank in a country, you need like a utility bill and all these things that often, if you're traveling, you just don't have. Yeah. So there's when like neobanks come around. It's like, oh, this is very interesting. Like things like Revolut and Wise and Mercury start to change the game, because there is this need for it. And so, I really see in the future this kind of network of places that you can kind of have a subscription to, maybe have ownership over one physical space, like a piece of real estate in one, but have access to the whole network. That's kind of what I'm building with Noma. I see this kind of 3-layered ecosystem where you have the physical spaces, you have the digital space, which is where you get all of your necessaries from residencies to eSIMs, and then there's kind of governance overlay, because I do see that the need to have more autonomy and control over the things that matter the most to you, and that could be education, that could be your taxes, and I'm really interested in this idea that taxes and residencies could be commoditized for the good of the consumer, right? Like you should be able to choose those things, and then consequently governments become more competitive, and so and I do see that happening in the next 10 years, maybe even 5.
And that's super interesting. And I think a lot of people who might not know about the network state, there's a great book by Balaji Srinivasan called The Network State. And there's now a network school, a network conference. I think we both attended as well.
I'll be there this year. If you're going to be there, maybe we'll meet in person.
Yeah. That's great. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully go to network school as well this year.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. You should definitely go. Noma is going to be launching a kind of partnership with them to be able to funnel nomads into the school and set up a little separate space there in Forest City, which was the kind of abandoned real estate that they took over. So they're definitely really bullish on that entrepreneurial side of their space. This like creating this perfect ecosystem for you to grind and become like, and get your kind of startup like up and running, be it bootstrapped or via, some capital. So definitely very, very interesting space.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how that's just really grown over the last few years. And I remember when that book came out, I read it immediately and was just, completely on board and blown away at the same time as how society is evolving. So do you see Noma Collective as a network state, or what's your kind of thought around how you're building it, the vision?
Well, so I think that like you actually asking the question of like almost like what is the definition of a network state, right? Like, because I think this is something that like when you're in nascent industries, you have a nomenclature issue. You have this kind of like lack of definitions. And so I'm in a bunch of groups with different, groups, communities that are considering themselves network states. And there's this big conversation about like what is a prerequisite for a network state, right? Like what does that look like? But in answer to your question, so I'll answer that question and then I'll answer like what I think a network state is. I believe a network society, as what I'm tending to call it, is this network of people that are living around the world and sharing infrastructure to allow that to set up to be smoother, right? Because the whole of the world previously was set up around this idea of I live in one place, so all the infrastructure is around that one place. And now I think like really what the network state kind of talks about is this, okay, what if that infrastructure is spread out across the world, and what does like a membership look like for that, right? Like that's, I think, is the most interesting piece of this. So I think Noma will graduate into a network state when it has a digital layer, which we're finalizing now, and when we have a governance piece. So I think those are the things that need to be present for a network state. There needs to be some sort of forward-thinking governance structure that should use the best technologies, which are generally blockchain like orientated. But I don't think that's a prerequisite. Like Prosper, I would consider a network state, but it's leaning more on the working within the traditional sovereign states governance structures. And then I think you need to have physical real estate. Like I love the way Balaji explains it. Like you meet in the digital space over like-minded concepts. You come into the physical space in pop-up format, and then you pull resources such as real estate, and then you govern those with the newest technology, right? Like that's kind of how I see it. So you could argue that we're not quite there yet, but I do tend to call us that. Like, I made the change on the Instagram handle, like to kind of be in that process. But yeah, I think that where it starts to become powerful, the next step there is, can a community like Noma meet in the digital space, come into the physical space, and then end up kind of pooling resources to a moment where they can actually negotiate with a sovereign nation over better tax brackets, over maybe a level of sovereignty. So I think that's his end, that's Balaji's end goal in the book, right? Is that, maybe be even recognized as your own sovereign nation via things like the UN or whatever. But I do think that, it's really hard to build a new country that tends to happen over like war or like, something a little bit like, and I don't want to do that. So I actually think that the special economic zone piece allows for a symbiotic relationship that makes sense for both parties. Like I'm in, I have some friends that are very well, placed in Paraguay. They're a group of local partners and also foreigners. And Paraguay has been the number one landing for digital nomads for taxes for some time now, and they're seeing a massive bump up. Right, so that's an example of a country that I think is perfect to kind of work with in a symbiotic relationship, because they want digital nomads and digital nomads want a better offering. So that for me seems to be like a really interesting example of how a community like ours can come into physical space, work with governments, and create like a network society.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's going to be countries, sovereigns that over time are really going to cater to, those of us that are looking either to build a network state or are digital nomads looking for a place to spend time and to get together. So it sounds like both sides are kind of moving towards each other, hopefully, with some interesting new innovation.
Oh, yeah, I think so. At the end of the day, countries are looking to up their GDP, and groups, when they get into bigger numbers, they start to have, power between them. And I think that the realization that you're able to even negotiate a tax bracket is a relatively novel concept for the average person, right? Like what was once reserved for large religious groups like the Mennonites, or like uber wealthy in Switzerland, or companies with states like, Apple or whatever, is now potentially available if we band together over these like-minded concepts for the average person. Which is, for me, is like, that's all I want. I think that I'm a big believer in free market capitalism. I don't like monopolies, and I think the governments are monopolies a lot of the time. So like that, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, because if that government wants to bring incentives in, and then I think there's an alignment there. I also just think the world is global now. So I believe that when personally, I'm like, when you go to start a business, you build a tech stack, right? Like, and I'm thinking about my life in the physical spaces like a personal stack, right, of places. Paraguay for my residency, for my taxes. America for my company, because it's the best place to set up a company. Like, the French Riviera and the south of Italy, because it's beautiful and has the best food and is great in summer. Like Mexico, because I love the culture here. Like, it's like Honduras, because it has this a high level of autonomy in Prospera, for me to be able to enact change in the education system for my child. I guess it's like the realization that there is no perfect place. Because I remember being like, I'm going to find the place, and I just actually think that's not, there's always a cost benefit analysis. There's always like a positive and negatives.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what is your perfect place? Have you found something close? Is that where you are now?
No, that's what I'm thinking, is like, it just doesn't exist. Like, I think there's perfect places for specific things, which is why we need to build the stack. It's like, I think Paraguay is the best place for taxes right now. I think Prosper is the best place for autonomy right now. I think the States is the best place to open a company right now. Like Merida was, and still is, at least right now, the best place for the comfort and the vibe and the weather and the proximity to like be able to fly. Because I'm like 3 hours from Cancun, and Cancun is like the best place to fly from. You can get anywhere from Cancun, right? Like, so yeah, that's how I'm seeing it.
Interesting. So you talked a bit about the fact that, people who want to be nomads start with, usually a job, and then they start off on a month trip, and then they kind of taste the excitement of living around the world, or in a new location, and then they kind of go from there. What do you think, in terms of society, is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, in terms of people becoming more remote and living more globally as a nomad? I mean, I know after COVID, there's a lot of companies that have kind of now started saying, hey, you have to be in the office. And, and a lot of other companies that are like, hey, you know what, we support everyone working remotely. And obviously we're on that side at SuperWorld, and I'm on that side personally, that you want to access the best resources around the world. How do you think we're moving as a culture, or a business culture, or organizational culture? Are we moving to back to where we were before COVID, or are we really expanding beyond that?
I mean, I definitely think we're expanding beyond that. Start there. I think that the return to office mandates are, I think they are nefarious in their intent. I think there's two main reasons why they happen. One is that commercial real estate's taken a massive hit, and they are trying their best to not be left with the bag, so to speak. And so I think that as those leases play out over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see that end. Because there's just people are locked into long-term leases, and there's billions of dollars in losses. And so I think that's a big piece. The other thing is, and this is particularly in the tech space, is that the yo-yoing from these policies allows for people to basically soft, let go of people, right? People opt out, and then they don't pay severance. Mm-hmm. And so by saying you can go be remote, and then a year later changing the policy, they found out they didn't need to pay severance. And so this is I've seen this. This is happening, unfortunately. And so it's sad that that's happening, but those are very short-term things in my opinion. I as I said, I think I said at the start, there's just going to be a subsection of jobs and humans that work from the computer. And then that's not even to take into account AI, right? As that develops, I've noticed this really interesting cadence where I'm able to prompt and then work out. and then come back and prompt and work out, or like play with my son, or have some ping pong games, or watch a movie. Like that's just, it's the whole paradigm of how we work in short spurts versus long periods of time. Like the idea that like to quantify a work day by hours, it's just going to not be relevant. It's going to be about output. Like it is already about output, but it's just the measurements haven't got there. And so like, that's how I see the space. I also think that there are some jobs that are just not very fulfilling. Like if we look at it like fulfillment level as like a soul, right? Like I'm sure like a Salesforce sales job is pretty unfulfilling. And so if you think about like that person being at home with no whip cracker behind them and not really loving their job, like I get it why that doesn't work sometimes. I get why those big like companies, corporate style kind of just basically driving your time for money jobs, like struggle with remote because there's no whip cracker. But I think it's a problem with there being no love for the thing you're doing versus like, you know, the remote piece not working, right?
Yeah.
You love what you do. You wake up in the morning and you grind and you do it because you're happy with that, right? Like I think it's more that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think the beauty of remote is if you can build a culture where you're attracting people that actually want to do the thing that you're building, they believe in the mission, then you've self-selected for people that are motivated to do the work. And if you haven't, then you kind of have the wrong people. And it's usually easy to tell that you don't have someone who's aligned. So you kind of self-select for that.
100%. And then like in terms of the world, something that, you know, you asked like a two-part question there. It's like, I think we're in this moment, in my opinion, where like, it's still the trailblazers who are like taking the jump. And I think the reason for that is because there isn't like a template, like an easy plug and play one-stop solution for you to start this lifestyle. I think when you look at as things become mainstream, it's because the barrier to entry is less and less, and the ease of getting into it is it's easier and easier, right? And so like my big play role thought process, whatever you want to call it, is like in the next 5-10 years is to like create an easier entry point for people who are remote to make that mean they actually live this remote first lifestyle. I think that will come with like the fear being taken away essentially, and it being easier and easier to start that journey. So that may start with these workations, these 1 month trips. It's super easy to pick you up from the airport. You know, you don't have to worry about being stuck in a foreign country, not knowing the language, not being able to connect to internet and losing your job or being robbed, right? Like you solve that problem. But then I think like it's the same premise that you have to solve that all the way through to like buying real estate and setting up a business and having taxes in another country. Like to go to the family piece as an example, most of so I'm doing a family trip in July this year. We've got like 20 families coming to Prospera. And I think I had like 500 families apply. So definitely a lot of people want to do this. But like most of those people were like, yeah, I was looking into Airbnbs, and then I was trying to find a school that I could get. And I just ended up like, just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't deliver to my partner or to like the family team, like, here's how we're going to do it. You know, because it's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of moving parts. And so like, you know, next year we're launching this permanent family hub in Prospera with a very simple sell to try and solve this problem, which is like you have accommodation, schooling, and taxes all in one package, 1 month, 6 month, 12-month packages. Just like super simple. Like you can come, try it out for a month, you can extend, or you can just make the jump and do the whole year. You've got the schooling, you've got the housing, and if you want, you can like look at business or personal tax. And then it starts to, I think, make the decision way easier for people, right? Like, oh, they see the pathway clearer, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So basically it's a full stack for any, you know, nomad or aspiring nomad. I know one question that a lot of people have is where do they go? Where do they start? Like what city do they start at? A lot of people, you know, have a lot of indecision of where. And I know you're pretty global and you have lots of opportunities for people all over the world. But how do they figure that out? Do you have a calendar, or does that change? Or how do you guys decide where you're going to be throughout the year?
We've tried to be as global as possible because that's what I want to offer. I want people to, like, my opinion is like the perspective you gain from traveling is so important for you to be a better person. It gives you like just this perspective that allows you to be, more benevolent and kind to the way other people live their life. Like, you realize there's a million ways to live life, and that's really important. It's like the exact opposite of a bubble, basically. You know what I mean? And so that's always been a big thing for me. The way we started it was like, go anywhere. And then actually what we realized is, again, it's all about the moment you are in your journey, right? So like initially it was very much like, yeah, go anywhere. And now we've changed it a lot. And what we actually recommend is that people do a soft landing into like a city first. Because if they're from New York or they're from LA or they're from somewhere like that, and they have this vision of they want to go to like an island, like, or somewhere remote like Belize, or what you actually realize is they would still want a level of infrastructure that place can't deliver. And so even softer landing would be like a Buenos Aires, for example, or a Medellin, like where you still can get your flat white coffee and there's still a million co-working spots, but you have this new culture and language and stuff. So you're having this kind of like middle ground. And then like we run a lot of trips once or twice a year. And actually what we're seeing now is that like the thing we want to have the most control over is the guest experience. We want to be able to deliver that. And so as we grow, we're kind of aligning with real estate partners and kind of being able to have autonomy over the guest experience by actually in some places even building out the spaces, right?
Cool.
And so I think like fast forward to 5 years from now, I'm imagining kind of like 10 to 12 permanent hubs that are running all year round. And then this kind of like spattering of 1 or 2 times a year trips in like new locations as new places become discovered. Like I'm seeing a lot of movement into like Vietnam right now, but I probably wouldn't go and do a full year there yet. We did a really successful trip recently in Da Nang and people loved it. And it was like, ooh, this is cool. How about we like double down and do 2 or 3 next year? So we also do see these one-off trips kind of converting into permanent hubs. But that's kind of how I'm seeing that, because realistically, if you want to offer the infrastructure as you get further down this journey, you're going to need things like schools in all these places. Schools, I want to use that term loosely, places where you educate and learn, not traditional schools. I don't want to stick a bunch of kids in a classroom. I'm not a fan of that. I think it should be much more open in nature. And maybe in another podcast we can get into education, because I think I could talk about that for like an hour or two. But definitely, like, having the ability to create that ecosystem in those physical spaces and have then nomads come in and like it and want to be a part of that culture and that ecosystem, and then maybe even buy real estate in that location.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the business could expand into that category as well as helping nomads with the logistical aspects of real estate or visas or immigration? That is a growing segment as more people are kind of looking at exploring living around the world. What are your thoughts on how you can help with that part of the process too?
Again, I think like what we're missing is like a one-stop shop in the industry. Like there are a bunch of great developments. There are a bunch of great people who help you with your visas. It's like, I don't want to take their, like, what their business is. In fact, the way I see it is actually like kind of referred or preferred partners is the structure of it. So like if we've helped someone travel and take their training wheels off and then they're full nomad, like they probably will come back to us and go, hey, like I'm thinking about getting a tax residency somewhere, like where do you recommend? And then I would pass them on to the people that I trust. So it's more about like assuming, hopefully, that we know what this community wants, and kind of creating a marketplace where we can align with preferred vendors.
Cool. Yeah. So you wouldn't build that out.
That's what we're building out right now. The MVP will be ready at the end of Q3 this year, hopefully.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and what do you think the biggest challenges are psychologically for a family? Because I know one thing that we hear a lot is, hey, like, and you talked a bit about education with kids and, or hey, are they going to be okay moving around, or, or even adults, the parents kind of like, how are they dealing with kind of uprooting or being in different places? What are some of those things that, as a experienced nomad like yourself, that you think that some of these people might experience that they kind of overcome over time? What are some of the common fears you mentioned?
The fears that are real versus the fears that are not real, right? Like, I think there's a level of like, you have to treat safety with respect, do your research, figure out zones where you can and can't go, learn about the local culture. Don't be the person shouting loud in your language and walking around with your iPhone like this. That's just like 101 of like how to integrate into a place. But then like the fears that I think you can overcome by infrastructure and by learnings are like, and these are valid in my opinion, specifically around families. Kids want structure. It's good for them to brush their teeth at the same time in the same place every day. They have friends in those early years. Those friends are really important. And so I've thought a lot about this and like examples of how you can solve that. The housing and the school physical spaces, the architecture should mimic and have similarities from each other. So while, I'm not talking about it looking physically the same. It's like the idea I always say, or the way I explain it, is like when the kid goes into the new classroom, let's say there's this network of 10 classrooms around the world, and I use these words loosely like classroom, but like say there's a network of those classrooms, the kid should kind of know where to go hang up his bag. That should always kind of be in the same place. And that creates that familiarity, even though you're in a new place. Now, if you've got 10 other families traveling with you, then you solve the problem of the kids because you travel with families together. You travel in a group. Again, we're pack animals. We like to do things together. So I think there's no reason why we've seen it work with single nomads. Why wouldn't it work with families? Again, it's just about having that network of people to do it with. So if you can nail the familiarity of the physical space and you can nail the community, then I think you solve the fears of what most people say when they're like when they're not going to do this lifestyle, which is like, oh, my kid and his friends and routine and all of those things. So like, and then you could argue connection of schooling, the systems. So if you're going to take your kid from one system and put them into our system, that then they can then go back into that system if they need to, right? Like, so there's a couple bits of logistics around that, but all super doable, right? Like, so that's what I thought about a lot with respect to the family piece. And then, yeah, I think like if you can create the way for people to connect digitally and find their crew within your bigger network with some sort of hub, a digital hub, then I think that solves the problem of like needing to, because I understand like you don't want to come on a Noma trip 12 months of the year. You get community fatigue. You want to have the high community moments 2, 3, 4 months of the year, maybe, right? And then the rest you want to recover and you want to hibernate. And so it's like allowing for that connection to happen, for that preferred network to happen. Those are some of the things that I've thought about in terms of solving those problems or those fears.
Yeah. And so there's that digital piece that you're talking about building. And, I think we're looking at over the next 5 to 10 years, so much advancement. You mentioned AI earlier, in terms of changing how you work and workflows and things like that. What is the digital overlay for how you think of Noma Collective or the Nomad, network state kind of groups? We touched on it a bit with network states as well. But what is that? How does that work?
It's the one that I have, if I'm honest, the least clear in my head, because like I've always been more on the physical space. And like, I think there's something to be said about like, I think we've got to a point where like, I'm not sure, it's way harder to get people to download a new app. People are kind of set on their apps, right? Like I think that's a big hurdle to overcome. So like, we currently, our communication digitally is all via Slack. We started in a very tech heavy community. But I'm like, I think, I use WhatsApp and Telegram in the, Telegram in the crypto community. Like, we speak on Telegram, for example, but like my whole music community speaks on WhatsApp. So you've got this kind of like fragmented like setup already. And then so to add in a fourth one is really difficult. And then so like, I'm kind of like unsure about the platform. I know what you want is a place where people can. I think there's something really interesting about the geolocation piece. I think there's something really interesting about this like digital world piece that you're very deep into. And then like, the idea of an alumni portal where everyone can connect, I have my property on the preferred property place so that it can be rented within the community. There's the aspect of like the tools that you can use within the alumni community that are in the digital space to like purchase, swap, exchange, create this like point or credit system, even so far to go as far as like what they're doing in Prosper, where you have your own stable coin. Like I would love to be able to have my own stable coin, because then I could truly show the impact of the dollars being spent in all the different places. Like that would be amazing. So it's kind of like where I'm at right now is I know what needs to be created, but I don't necessarily have clear what the product is if I'm going to build from scratch and really go down that pathway of like trying to get everyone to go onto my thing, or have it fragmented, or maybe API develops further and I can have like WhatsApp inbuilt my portal, which there is already those opportunities there. That's kind of how so this is kind of like the area that I'm least sure about how the end stack is going to look, if I'm honest.
Yeah. No, I mean it's interesting, like how all these technologies are going to come together, and what kind of possibilities are. I think most people are going to, as we were discussing earlier, become freelancers and are going to become nomads. They're going to be more mobile. They're going to be communicating more globally using these tools or some tool that's coming out. And yeah, it's kind of a puzzle as to like what the best fit is for creating a digital network state, which I think is kind of one of the things that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Is there things that we haven't covered that you want to talk about, or things that you think are important for our audience to kind of understand about what you're building?
I think something that came to mind just on this last point is that like I think the way in which you're going to get maximum buy-in is if you offer like ability to enact change or have ownership over it. So like if you're looking at a real estate play and then there's like an HOA for that real estate, and then there's like voting rights, which again aligns a lot with like the network state piece. Like if you have to log into a app because you have to vote on what's going to happen in your community that you're really passionate about, then that's an example of when you would download another app. So I think there's like, ultimately, I think it probably sits at the end in something that's powerful enough for people to have enough input on to where they really go, okay, I'm interested in this. I can act change, and I want to be a part of that. So that's like, I guess, my closing thought on the previous kind of point that we spoke about. And then with respect to your question on what else, I mean, I think the thing that's the most interesting to talk about is there's this big gulf between like people who remote work and people who live this lifestyle. Like it's insanely big, the gap. Like when you talk about these broad TAMs, right? Like, you're talking about 37 million remote workers who are eligible to live this lifestyle in the States alone, right? And then you have like numbers like 80,000 people a month Googling remote work travel. Like that to me tells me that we have a top of funnel issue. Like we have an issue that people don't even realize this is a possibility. And so like something that I always talk about in these is like, I think it's on all of us to try and really think about how we can kind of let more people know that this is a thing. Because I think we haven't had our viral moment yet, like as a society, as like a movement. I don't think we have had that, because I think it's when I hear a lot of like it's almost like we're having a bit of like a identity crisis in the digital nomad space, because it was really cool
Mhm.
like early days, and then there's been like some logical kickback.
Mhm.
And I think some of that comes from the way in which it was set up initially. So, like, maybe worth going into this a little bit. Like, the
Yeah.
examples of Portugal and the examples of Medellin, like,
Mhm.
are two examples of where nomads have actually now looked on to be negative, right? And I think a lot of that is because when people move, like, I don't think anyone in Portugal ever thought that their golden visa and the digital nomad thing and everything that Gonzalo did with the Madeira village would go that well. Like, it went so well that the
Mhm.
real estate prices went so high. There was no mechanism to like uplift the local community. It wasn't built from the ground up with the local community involved.
Mhm.
So now you've got this like, well, hey, I used to live here. Like, now these digital nomads came in, and also locals came in, rich, locals came in, gentrification happened. And
Mhm.
now these people who are once living in this place now can't afford to live in the place they grew up. Same thing happened in Medellin. And so that's a real big problem, because it's like, how do we stop that from happening?
Mhm.
And then in turn, how do we change the way that people perceive the movement, and show them that maybe that movement does have roots, that people can put down roots and uplift the local community and be part of something that isn't just like a gated community, for lack of a better word. And that's, I think, a lot of people do, like, the kind of like nomad bro movement is very much like, I'm just going to go geo arbitrage and I don't care about the local community and I'm going to go and just take. And I'm
Mhm.
really like, think that's just fucking the wrong way to look at it. But it needs to be from the ground up, from the moment. So it's like when I'm working in Paraguay right now, that's like the number one thing on the tip of the tongue is like,
Mhm.
okay, how do we do this with the local? Paraguay's on that cut curve right now. Like,
Yeah.
I would bet good money that in the next 10 years, that is going to be a place that is going to times 5 times 10 in real estate for sure, and just be like a well-known on the map location for nomads. And I think we have this opportunity there to like build it more permanent, build it around families, and build it around like coming, exchange of knowledge, flow of knowledge both ways, and then have like this like kind of create a society, truly a society,
Mhm.
not like a bubble, right? Which I
Mhm.
think is where Medellin and Portugal maybe failed a little bit. But again, it's like you learn by failing, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think that there was I don't think we had the hindsight when those projects started to even know if it was going to happen or not, right? Like, in the way
Mhm.
that it did. So I think now is that's the next stage. So it's like, on one side, this top of funnel and making sure that people who have remote work jobs know that there's this whole world and it's their oyster. But then when they go and explore that world, also have them educated that it's not about just going there and taking. It's about how can we create these new societies around the local communities, and actually add value there rather than just the taking aspect.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think as we're kind of having the opportunity to really build on the foundations of the nomad movement that existed in different places and got those lessons, we're able to kind of formulate it in a way that's supportive of the original authentic kind of community that people move to be a part of in concert with that community. So there's that ecosystem that builds that benefits the community and doesn't, as you said, be kind of extractive from the community itself. Yeah, very interesting. What you're doing is so amazing because it really helps people come together and create relationships with each other and learn from each other on, how to live this lifestyle, but also, maybe start businesses together, kind of grow their ecosystems. Do you have any stories of, connections that have kind of come out of Noma Collective? And, I know we've met through friends, a couple of friends, and I think there's a small world here that kind of exists. But would love to hear some of those stories, kind of as a closing of this
Sure, man.
conversation.
Yeah, like, so I'll start. So do you remember what, I don't know if you were how in this, but like when were going to do their like IPO, which ended up not happening, they were so concerned about their EBITDA that they had this like adjusted EBITDA, which was like took into
Mhm.
account all these like other metrics, which
Mhm.
in that like
particular context investors wanted to hear, but I really loved this idea of really looking at these metrics that aren't like just dollars, right? It's not just profit and loss. It's like, what are these other metrics, right? So then like when we did that, like with Noma, we came across a whole bunch of awesome ones. It was like, I think now we're up to like 7 or 8 babies.
Oh,
We're
cool.
up to like over 10 or 15 marriages.
Nice.
We have like obviously like thousands of friends made, but like definitely like I remember putting on an alumni trip, and I was going out to this crew of people like, hey, we're thinking of doing an alumni only trip in like, July next year. Is everyone down? And then my friend was like, stop, like, no, we're about to get married. And like everyone you're trying to invite to this is we need to come to our wedding. And so then what we realized is we had an alumni reunion at a wedding with like 30 people that were all met through Noma, or like, we have, during that first cohort, there was 4 babies that were born out of that, like,
Wow.
including my, like, right. Like, so, but when we first had like, we had like a seed round, right? We went out to our alumni and we were actually able to get like 15 alumni to invest in Noma. And like a lot of those people who were that kind of the first entrepreneurs in our community also started and ran businesses together. So like 2 of our investors like made a business together, subsequently are like super successful in that business. So that's actually an area I really want to dive into more. I think we're really good at the personal growth aspect, and then like having gone to all of these network state kind of pop-ups, Frontier Tower out of SF and Network School out of Malaysia are 2 just prime examples of how if you do the exact same thought process but have it geared towards like entrepreneurship, it can fulfill the other bucket, which is like professional growth. So yeah, like that's kind of like the way I'm seeing that. My numbers grow in my adjusted EBITDA.
Yeah, I mean, those are all very important part of this, ecosystem and the business itself. And I think investors who are aligned with social good and making the world a better place, I think really recognize those things. So, no, it's hats off to you in terms of like what you've built so far. And we're very excited to see how we can work together as well. So very awesome to hear your story. And thanks again for joining us today and
Man.
really appreciate it. Yeah, where's the best place for people can learn about Noma Collective? How can they get to know you? Where should they go to find you?
So noma-collective.com is our website. We just think in the next 2 weeks we'll have launched our new website with like the whole ecosystem and kind of like the bigger network society movement play and kind of this big transition that I've been talking about for a while, and so I'm really excited about that. So look out for that change. And then Instagram is probably the best place for you to see kind of the day to day and like, what's happening on the trips right now and the people and all of that. That's Noma Collective HQ. And then I will preface this by saying I'm really bad at social media. Like I go in spurts. So forgive if I don't post for a while, but I am in charge of the X profile, which I've just started doing about 4 or 5 months ago. So my more personal takes and things that I'm interested about, when I have the moment, I need to get more regular on it, but when I have the moment, I'm on there, and I think that's just Noma Collective. So
Awesome. Well, looking forward to being with you at some point soon at one of your events, or maybe at Network State soon too, so we can be in person. Thanks again for joining today, and looking forward to a follow up here when you launch the newer products and everything too. So thanks for joining.
yeah, man. Likewise, it's a pleasure. Take it
Awesome.
easy.
Thanks, man. See ya.